Now, staying with Nigeria's apex financial regulator, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, made multiple transfers totaling $616 million to the Office of the National Security Advisor, NSA, between August 2016 and November 2018, in a rare practice that exposes the opaque dealings of the Apex Bank under the recently suspended Governor Godwin Emefiele. Data obtained from the website of the CBN showed that the Apex Bank started making these transfers to the NSA in August 2016, about a year into the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari. There was no such transfer made in the years leading up to that, according to CBN data going back to 2004. But since the first transfer was done, the practice continued every month until November 2018. The CBN has not published data on its operations since 2018. And now to discuss this, we are joined by Gospel Obele, Chief Economist, Streetnomics. Thank you so much for joining us on NC Continental Prime. Now, going straight into the discussions, the Central Bank of Nigeria made multiple transfers totaling $660 million to the Office of the National Security Advisor between August 2016 and November 2018. These are the new revelations that we're seeing, and it's quite exposing the opaque dealings of the Apex Bank under the recently suspended Governor Godwin Emefiele. I mean, these are very serious and grave allegations against the Apex Bank. What do you make of all of this revelation?
Well, my simple thoughts process to this particular allegation is the fact that there are clearly, very deep leakages within the monetary system, and more especially how the monetary institutions interact and seek to sort of probably collaborate with fiscal authorities to scale and drive interest forward. So we're living in really complicated times. Part of what makes this VUCA. And within the level of complexities is the fact that if you do not close up leakages or build layers of accountability systems, transparency and all that, you will not be able to sort of build the intelligence to be able to track and identify what is going where and to who and what, right? So it's more or less a more fundamental, root causal issue that borders heavily on the leakages within the fiscal and monetary exchange than just an individual or just in an administration or how long these monies have been transferred. I mean, we're just talking about this because we've been able to identify this, we've seen this, and the stories out there as a breaking developing story. However, there are also many other blocks of dealings that are, happening across agencies, across institutions, private to public and the likes. And it just speaks to the complexity and realities of the leakages, the sophisticated nature of leakages that exist, and the economics of interest as well, that exists side by side with these leakages. So a lot more needs to be done in terms of seeing the big picture of what's actually happened, than just, again, within the short term, taking up actions on the parties involved.
Now, still looking at these leakages and the administration process, this all happened on the former President Muhammadu Buhari. You were talking about the administration and, talk about transparency. Can we say that the president is not actually aware of all these dealings? Because it's a huge flow. We're talking about movement of money from the Central Bank of Nigeria to the National Security Advisor.
I mean, the level of leakages that are being closed or that's being closed in the system, or the level of the weight of interest that are being facilitated through leakages, in a system, to a very large extent, is also a function of, the strength of institutions or the ideology around these institutions in these different markets. So take, for instance, exclusive institutions will always drive a higher weight of, interest and leakages than inclusive institutions. Not to say that you don't have leakages in inclusive institutions or you don't have sort of these dealings there, but you realize that there's a functional economy working side by side with maybe all of these need to, identify interest and speak to them when necessary. So it's likely not impossible that the parties involved at the time, to the level of the key decision maker at the time, did not know about this. It's likely very much impossible, But however, like I mentioned, the ideology around institutions that govern the monetary and fiscal collaboration or engagement in Nigeria are largely extractive. And on the core or the wings of extractiveness, the fact that interest must be sorted, interest must align for any policy or engagement to take on.
Now, this revelation is coming at a time where we have the suspended CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele. A lot of people had lots of things to say when he was suspended. First of all, we thought it was about the Naira redesign and all of that. And now we're seeing these opaque dealings going on. Could this be one of the reasons he's been held?
I mean, it could be one of the reasons. It may be not one of the reasons, or it could be a developing story that sort of emerging, as a result of the suspension and all that. So there are a lot more around the story that we may not be able to cover, or we don't have access to in terms of what's classified, what's not, what's public and what's not. But however, the concept around the suspension was very built largely around the monetary behavior and the use of monetary tools within the economy in the last 4 to 5 years, in more recent times, and how that has really hurt the economy and put it in a very dire state, and also the need to sort of, check, and probably design some more accountability measures, for the central bank. Yeah, central banks are largely expected to be autonomous, but in many cases in the world, you can hardly find a central. Again, like I mentioned earlier on, it's still a game of interest, and facilitating interest on the grounds of the institutional ideology that drives the governance of the day, which is very, very key. So, and that's what we find here in the case of the suspension of the central bank, ex-central bank governor.
Now, talking about accountability, I mean, it's one side we have the suspended CBN governor, but we also know that there are two parties and a lot of parties that I'm sure that we will find out later. And that's the Office of the National Security Advisor. Do you think that the former NSA should also be investigated if we're looking at proper investigations and accountability of these very serious issues that we're dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, it's also important to just take on here that accountability and transparency is also very relative. And also the limits of what can be accountable for and what's transparent are also very, very relative, based on the context, based on who's driving what, based on many complex narratives. So the decision to investigate, the NSA and all that, to a very large extent, to a very large extent, so decision of the president at the moment. All right. So, and there are many more intricacies around that decision than just the need to suspend and investigate or not. All right. However, I believe, again, like I mentioned earlier on, it's a developing story, and we are also going to see how the president seeks to address or takes this on, and how he tends to do that would go a long way as well to inform, where the positioning, the language, the approach, or the outlook, of such intricate issues would look like, for the new presidency. Yeah.
Definitely, we will look at how the situation pans out, and we do hope for proper investigation to this issue. Thank you so much for sharing your candid thoughts, gospel, on this issue. Thank you.
Okay.